Hello and welcome back to JLXP, the world's quarterfinal edition. Really a tragically beautiful first quarterfinal between GenG and HLE because they are two of the best teams in the world and they do not deserve to play each other in a quarterfinal. These teams deserve to play each other at the least in a world semifinal, potentially a world final, because on the year, these are the top two teams in the Riot Global Power Rankings. HLE is the first stand winner. GenG is the MSI winner. They've both been towards the top of the LCK the entire year. The star power on both these rosters is absolutely incredible. We have 5 former world champions in this game. Ruler won in 2017 on Samsung, Cannon won in 2020 on Damwon, Viper won in 2021 on EDG, Zeka won 2022 on DRX, Zeus won in 23 and 24 with T1. So the last 5 years of world championship winning teams have a representative within this game. Also, it's Peanut's last Worlds having to go up against the number one team in the world in the quarterfinal. A quick rundown of Peanut's career. He has 500 plus wins in the LCK. Career win rate of 63% with 738 wins and 428 losses. He has 1 LCK MVP. He has 7 LCK championships. He has an MSI championship, a first stand championship, but tragically, no world titles. On the side of GenG, specifically Chovy, you have this guy who's went into the world championship. This is pretty much his 4th year now, thinking that he is either the favorite or one of the favorites to win, and he's never been able to do it. You also have all this cross-pollination of players across the two teams from GenG that are now on HLE. So that 2022 version of GenG, who I need to correct, last podcast I said they got reverse swept. No, they lost to DRX 3-1 in the semifinals. That one had Peanut jungle, Ruler 80 carry, Chovy mid, Doran top, Lehens as a support. The next year they run it back. They lost to BLG in 5 games in the quarterfinal. That had Delight and Pays because Ruler had gone to JDG, still had Peanut, fell short once again. Last year, 2024 HLE has Keen, Canyon, Chovy, Pays, Lehens. They fall short just barely in semifinals to T1, 3-1. And then this year, they kind of bring parts of the old band back together by bringing Ruler back into the team, and they have this really young, explosive support in Duro, who's just been playing incredibly, now having to face HLE in the quarterfinals. And I imagine most of you know the result of this series. Most of you have probably watched this series either in its entirety or through highlights. But reading through some of the comments in the post-game thread, as much as the series was entertaining and good, I think it ended in a one-sided fashion, which can make you remember it a little bit differently. I personally think that this was a really close series, and I want to talk through it game by game. So the way this is going to work, I'm going to pull up the VOD for the drafts because it just has a better Fearless readout once we get into the later series going over the draft. Mostly I'll talk through the high-level points of what happened in the game. I'll show a couple of clips that I think are important, but I just want to paint the picture of how close this series was and share my analysis throughout. So switching over to Game 1 draft, I don't necessarily think this draft was hard won or lost by either team. In fact, I think it was just a really intelligent draft by both teams. HLE target banned out mid pretty early on. They end up getting the Talia into Ryze matchup, which I think is pretty favorable. When I looked at Games of Legends, Talia has a 69% win rate against Ryze this year across 111 games, that's one of the highest champion versus champion win rates with a sample size of 100 games that I've pretty much ever seen. That's over 2/3 of the games Talia ends up winning. I don't think it dominates the matchup in lane, but I think some of the strengths of Ryze, which is about splitting the map around and playing to sides, Talia can just do it faster with her wall, and then she can also outrange the Ryze in teamfights, which is one of the things that I think ended up keeping this game close. I think the teams dropping Sion in this draft was generally correct. I don't think any team really committed too hard to a dive composition or something that Sion would excel against, so they ended up kind of staying away from it throughout the entire draft, which I think was smart, and this was a close game. The first clip is actually going to be around 18 minutes into this game. I know I'm jumping forward a fair bit, but there's a lot to cover in the series, and I can't get lost in too many of the early game details. It was the 5-man bot dive that HLE did. And on the surface, this looks like a really poor tempo play because they're already down about 2,000 gold against this GenG team who had laned exceptionally. Chovy's Rise had 161 CS to the Talia's 144 CS at 15 minutes, which is about 15 more CS than the average in the matchup. So Chovy laned exceptionally well in this game. But they just five-man dive Keen. And then if you look at the minimap, they're losing a lot for this in terms of overall map state. They're losing mid-turret. They were going to be trading the top tier 1 for the bot tier 1. And then they're also losing the tier 2 top, which because GenG sticks around for it, they're eventually going to be able to trade it for their own tier 2. But what this ends up doing is it does open up the map, and that's where the HLE composition actually needs to attack, because they have the Sejuani Pantheon Rek'Sai, which is really good Sejuani passive stacking, and it's really good at chasing down single targets. So even though they lost the map with this initial trade, they end up overstaying in their own bot side jungle. Ruler likely thinks they back, so he tries to cheat this one extra wave, but gets caught by the Rek'Sai and the Pantheon on the way back up, and they burn his cleanse, as well as getting a shutdown onto Ruler. So that's one. But because the map is so open, and the waves are pushing so deep for GenG, it just gives, in my opinion, HLE a longer runway to keep up with them. So Chovy then moves towards the top lane, probably feels like he's safe to push in this one more wave, but HLE can just send 4 more people at him and get yet another shutdown, which leads to this Otacon, and to me really keeps them in this game. So this was looking to be a pretty one-sided runaway from GenG after the laning phase and some of the tempo they'd created, but I thought HLE did a great job there picking off Ruler and picking off Chovy, in which you could kind of classify as mistakes or overstays by Chovy and Ruler, but you just don't necessarily expect them to send that many people and have that much reach on you. The overstay in the bot early to get the surprise onto Ruler, and then Chovy I'd say is a slightly bigger mistake because he did actually have the ability to probably walk this one off, but decided to stick around for a little bit of extra trading. So if you watch this here, he feels like he's gotten away with it and tries to trade back as much damage as possible. But then he just ends up getting tagged by Peanut's W and falls anyway. But the overall collapse on the map, I thought, was really strong by HLE. I have a checkpoint at 31 minutes into this game just to show how close it actually was with so much back and forth. Look at the gold here. 58,000 to 58,300. It's 16 kills to 14. It's 2 Drakes to 2 on both sides. The team fights in this game were absolutely cracked. Like, Ruler and Viper, I think, played these fights as good as you can play them as AD carries. I have maybe a tiny nitpick with Viper's build. He's gone the Serpent's Fang and the Mortal Reminder, so he's doing the shield reduction and the healing reduction for his team, where I would like him to more just full prioritize damage and have potentially the Talia just pick up the Morellos a little bit earlier if they really need it, but that's a really, really minor nitpick on the Corki build. I'm more disappointed in how this game ended sort of randomly. So there was so much good map play back and forth. HLE opening up the map, making it so GenG couldn't push sides too well, outraging the Rise in a lot of team fights, landing a lot of flicks. You can see Chovy, trading ults with the Talia and Rise. That just happened right before this Baron Force. But then a random blast cone, to me, actually ends the first game. So 32 minutes at the Baron Pit. HLE mainly just starting it to try and gain some position on the map. As Canyon goes in here through the Hex Gates, Zeus follows over because they're looking to burst down Canyon, and Canyon ends up, remember, Zeus has just used his tunnel to get over onto the blast cone, has no flash on the Rek'Sai, gets blast cone back into the pit. So he's dead. Zeus is just dead off of that blast cone. And this is probably a point in the game where HLE needs to just give the Baron, because then they can maybe get some picks to fight back. I also understand, though, that they are a pick composition. They're getting a little bit outscaled here, and they don't want to just give up the Baron for free. But it's a 4v5, and they lost the Rek'Sai for effectively nothing, so they're always going to lose this fight. As it continues, Canyon has a great engage with Duro's Nico. They wombo combo them. They kill everyone except for Peanut Sejuani. And then GenG just pushes him in and ends game one. So just what to me was a really awkward ending to game one for a game that I really think could have gone either way. Like if this Blast Cone doesn't hit Zeus back, I still feel like it's anyone's game. The Talia does outrange the Ryze in teamfights. While there's a slight scaling advantage on the side of GenG, I don't think it's insurmountable. So this is like, when you have two teams this good, sometimes it comes down to random things, and the Blast Cone into the ace, I'd say the Blast Cone is unluckiness. The overstay is a mistake by HLE, but with the Blast Cone happening, I think their win percentage would have dropped to about 20% if they give up the Baron anyway, so I understand why they didn't want to give it away. Yeah, so some notes about this game one. Crazy game. 35 kills in 33 minutes. Viper did 39,000 damage. Rula did 35,000 damage, so both of them were over 1,000 DPM. HLE had the gold lead early on in the game at 8 minutes and again at 30 minutes, so it was very back and forth. There was one lucky play that I didn't cover where HLE did pretty much hard flip the Baron and win. And I'd say Duro landed insane Nico ults throughout the entire game and was one of the difference makers. So a really competitive first game, thinking that maybe we can see a really back and forth series. And holy crap, this game two was an absolute banger. I'm just setting up the draft to the right point in the VOD so that I can talk about the pick order. But, oh my goodness, what a game. So here we go. Here's the draft. The mid lane bans that we saw in game one, GenG decides not to do them. They would rather trade mid laners, so they trade the Azir for the Orianna. I really liked HLE's comp here, the way they completed everything. So in the 4-5, GenG wanted to take the Varus. They'd banned the Jhin as well because they know that like any Azir comp wants to play with a lot of range. So Varus and Jhin could have been nice ranged AD carries to combo with it. But then after first picking the Varus, this Ziggs pick, man, it's just so good. Ziggs, compositionally, is just so good into the Orianna and Varus because these are two champions that do want to outrange you, but Ziggs just outranges them. So I don't think GenG ends up with enough dive to actually get on successfully to a Ziggs and an Azir, and they're kind of outranged. So GenG, despite having good engage with Nautilus, Orianna, and Jarvan, there's good anti-dive with Xin and Poppy and insane range for HLE. Not to mention, because they were able to pick this Ambessa, they have enough AD damage with Zeus' Ambessa and Peanut Xin. And this Gwen pick that GenG ends up doing on 5, it's the first Gwen we've seen at Worlds. The nerfs really did hurt her, I think, substantially. And the early game in this, what ended up being the longest Worlds game by far, it was 58 minutes. It was 13 minutes longer than the next longest Worlds game from play-in or Swiss stage. Zeus started 0-3 on the Ambessa, but was pressuring the Gwen like the entire time from a gold deficit. So Zeus, he lost a 1v1 early in the top lane to Keen's Gwen. Then he got ganked a couple of times, but he still managed to keep up the pressure. So I feel like this Gwen was like a desperation pick by GenG that just barely worked out. I don't think it's going to be this repeatable, we can leave Ambessa up in order to pick Gwen. I think they were pushed into a corner. They just kind of pulled out the Gwen, and it ended up working out for them. I also think that Viper Ziggs, even though he's only played it twice in 2025 and 9 games in his career, it's really good. Viper, who a lot of the LCK fans have been referring to HLE as actually Viper Life Esports, it was true again today. He was ahead in basically every game as AD carry. He can also play mages. I was looking up his history on mages back in Griffin in 2018 or 2019, the year that mage AD carries were in. He was 12-1 on Vladimir as well. So he's not one of these AD carries who's just like so headstrong about playing AD that he can't play mages. He's a master of pretty much everything he touches. So this game, because it was 58 minutes, I do have an extended amount of clips. I don't have that many from the early game, but we're going to get into how insane this game actually ended up being with the Otacon, which ended up being one of the initial mistakes by HLE. All right. Delight makes a small mistake here, and they get absolutely destroyed for it. So HLE wants to set up the Otacon, and likely they want to poke GenG as they come in. You can see Delight at the top of the Otacon pit here. You can look at the minimap. They get both TPs out. So at this point, HLE, especially now when they see Keen on that control ward, should probably back away because Zeus on the minimap isn't in position yet. He's up in mid lane, so they need to stall for just a little bit of time. But Delight kind of goes in on the Nautilus. He was probably going to be getting hit by the hook anyway, so you can see Steadfast Presence gets hooked, rooted, stunned, hit by Varus ultimate, and basically one shot. And then I would want to commend GenG for how spread out they are around this Otacon pit, never grouping up for what would be a good Azir shuffle or good Ziggs poke. And Chovy just absolutely works Peanut on the outside of this fight. Lands a shockwave on him while HLE is incredibly spread out, basically kills him by himself, and gives GenG a pretty big lead in the game. But it's not enough of a lead to win. So 35 minutes is when HLE makes a big comeback here. So GenG's got a 5,000 gold lead, but it is really hard to make progress against Ziggs, Azir, and Bessa with the tools that they have. I was talking about the engage tools they have. So it's just like so much poke that can go down onto them. Ruler gets hit by the outside of the Ziggs ultimate, taken to basically half health in the Baron pit. Any more Ziggs poke hits him, he's never going to be able to enter the fight. So despite having this 5,000 gold lead, GenG just can't actually force Baron. So the game ends up stretching and stretching and stretching. This is where we had an insane sequence. So it's 36 minutes into the game. GenG's still up 4,000 gold. They've been on soul point for the last two Drakes. HLE kind of miraculously stays in this one by stealing as many Cloud Drakes as they possibly can. And it looks like potentially they're going to win the game here. Down on the bottom side, Ruler successfully flashes the Azir ultimate with his Varus. Doesn't get knocked back. Ends up one-shotting the Azir. And then Chovy does take a bunch of damage down on the bot side of this fight. So watch Chovy. Just dove on hard there by Peanut and Delight. Almost one shot. Ends up falling. But still, you'd think it's a big win for GenG. Despite Ruler flashing away from this fight perfectly, it still ends up being this extended 3v3 where HLE prevents Soul Point but lose Peanut for it. Keep going, and GenG, this is still the same play, decides to go for Baron. This is to me one of the best fights that HLE has. So even though GenG is spread out, HLE just all kind of individually play their sequence well. So Zeka sees Ruler on the other side of the pit, knows he has no flash, can throw him back into the Poppy and kill him. On the other side of the fight, Viper and Ambessa absolutely tag team Chovy there, nearly one-shotting him with the Ziggs damage at this stage of the game. We're 38 minutes in, the outside of the ult easily finishes off Chovy, and this gives HLE Baron and brings them back into the game. And with the compositional advantage they have at this point, with the Ziggs and the Azir and how much range they have with double death cap and Chovy not early itemizing any magic resist or Rod of Ages, he's just paper, not really able to get involved in a lot of these fights. You kind of wonder, like, how is GenG going to win this game at all? So watch what happens to Chovy in this 42-minute fight. This is where I thought for sure we are going to game 3 with a 1-1 because HLE has clutched it out and came back in this game. Chovy cannot enter these fights. So 42 minutes, still doesn't have any magic resist. Ziggs has to land basically one spell onto Chovy to take him out of the fight. It ends up happening very shortly. 1Q lands as Chovy's trying to combo a Shockwave on the outside of the ultimate. Right here, the Nautilus ends up getting knocked out. Or sorry, the Jarvan ends up getting knocked out while Shockwave is on, so the combo dies. But look at Chovy. Literally 1Q and a Ziggs ult, and Chovy's out of the fight. So I definitely feel like the game is over here. And this is likely where HLE is going to have the biggest nightmares. Because game 1 was close, sure. The Blast Cone was unlucky. Cloud Soul completed. Ziggs alive. Azir alive. Literally the whole team alive. 2 dead. Jarvan not seeming to be able to make it out into base. I'd say Canyon does a great job escaping Peanut to get off his recall. Jarvan, really hard for him to run down. But with Ziggs, I tried to reach out to APA to get his opinion on this, but I'm pretty sure that this is a GG if they play this properly. So look at the setup right here. At this point in the game, with Ziggs' AP, an auto attack with his passive and a satchel will likely just one-shot a turret, as long as a minion gets into range to remove the backdoor bonus. I also think he has enough zoning spells that he's the one that needs to keep GenG off the wave. So I think if Viper is just throwing a minefield in the general area of Chovy or Ruler, that allows the wave to get closer. Also, Chovy only has a couple buttons to clear waves. And his priority is going to be to clear the waves. But if he's going to clear the wave, don't also let him clear the champions. So I think Zeus and Delight make a big mistake here, being on the wave. Zeus needs to be farther to the side. Viper needs to zone them. Essentially, I just want them to spread out so that if Chovy kills the wave, the backdoor bonus has a little bit of a delay. They'd still be able to kill that first turret. And when Chovy uses his spells on the wave, I think HLE could just kill Chovy. Or at the very least, burn his flash and stopwatch, and then can potentially just just brute force down the next turret and win the game. But what ends up happening, all of Viper's spells get used on nothing. So he has no cooldowns at this point. Also, doesn't auto-attack the turret. Then Shockwave does clear them. 2 of them die. They have to back up. And the game extends. So just completely insane. And on top of that, another lucky moment. I think this is another moment the game could have absolutely ended. It's the 45-minute Baron fight. You can see the total damage to champions at this stage in the game. Over 1,000 damage per minute by Viper's Ziggs. One more time. I want you to watch Ruler in this fight. The casters pointed it out, but I need to point it out again. This game is over if the Azir ult and the Xin ult don't counteract each other. So Zeka is sending Ruler into the pit, where Delight will be able to combo him, Peanut's waiting, Viper can easily burst him down, but Peanut Xin ults at the same time and knocks both of the people that will be thrown over by the Azir ult back over the wall to Azir, so they can't finish him off. It is the craziest sequence. On top of that, Zeus's ult misses. I think it was going to line up really well with Ruler, but he got thrown back. Ruler lives. They don't get him. And then I feel like it continued to be back and forth. And like game 1 is a really sad ending to the game where GenG just kind of walked them down. So I'm a little shocked that the team with Cloud Soul can even get walked down like this, but Peanut hesitates a little bit trying to hold mid. His team decides not to hold mid. He's like half a second late on it, and then everyone on GenG just collapse on him while he's a little bit split up from his team. Once his GA is down, a 57-minute fight, they would likely just have to concede this entirely, but they stick in it. They try and turn it around a little bit like game 1 when losing Peanut and likely the Elder would have probably made the game like a 20% win, so they decide to just take the chances right now, get completely wiped in the fight, and go down 0-2. So against GenG, I really don't feel like you can have 2 games that are this close that you don't convert and still have any chance of winning the series, because there were very small windows where I feel like they could have attacked GenG in both games 1 and game 2, and they nearly managed to take them down. But going into game 3, with that deficit of 0-2 is just absolutely tragic. Interestingly enough, this Game 3 draft is weird. I think GenG got absolutely destroyed in this draft. And since this is an LCK Finals rematch, I do find it so interesting because the first podcast I did about Worlds was when I was talking to Ox about the LCK. And he was telling me that 3-1 final by GenG versus HLE, that game loss was because GenG just had one absolutely turd draft. And we saw it again here. So GenG, they picked the Sion really early. But I also think it's a bit of a dangerous angle. I think the reason they didn't go Sion Trundle is they're thinking Sion Trundle bad against Rumble. Rumble can just take phase rush. He'll never be gankable. He'll have perma-prio. But you also really just can't then pick a second front line into the Trundle just because Skarner might have some like better gank threat onto the Rumble. So right now it's already a little bit cooked as a draft with just Rumble, Trundle, Sion, and Skarner locked in. Really nice early Rakan there as well because Rakan can pretty easily dive through the Skarner and the Sion, so any type of immobile front-to-back team composition that GenG is going to try and pair with the Sion Skarner is going to be vulnerable to the Rakan engage, so perfect ordering of the Rakan. In the 4-5, I also feel like HLE gets a bit of an outdraft where GenG, they tunnel a bit onto the Bard pick because they think that's good into Rakan, but the real prize here is the Sivir with all the 80 carry bands that have already gone down in the series. There's no good answer for the Sivir here, which then makes Ruler go for the Kai'Sa, which is okay into Sivir, but terrible in the overall context of GenG's team composition because they do not have enough setup for the Kai'Sa to dive in properly. And then on top of that, the Yone just doesn't have an answer from GenG in this fight. They have no way of locking him down when he flies in, so Zek can kind of just run over this game. So I really just thought this was like a 90-10 draft for HLE, which moving forward, I think if there would be a weakness for GenG, Chovy has no weaknesses, Ruler has no weaknesses, Keen can play anything, Canyon somehow is their like weakest player when he's one of the best junglers in the world. I think their weakness is occasionally they have these really weird drafts where either they get stuck in thinking about matchups too much and their overall team composition doesn't end up working. But this draft sucked, in my opinion. I think I don't need to spend too much time on Game 3, but I feel like the 15-minute, 30-second team fight is a good display of why the draft doesn't work out. So even without the Rumble ult, HLE, they can just run down the comp of GenG, who has no good answers for the Rakan or the Yone. So Delight can fly right through everyone after the Bard ult comes out. Yone on the outside here can just poke Chovy as much as he wants, never going to get stunned by the gravity well. Rakan flies in, everyone on GenG has to just back away. Like, there's just no... It's a combination of having poor lockdown, poor dive defense, and no chance against what HLE has unless they get massively far ahead in lane or win some early fights in a really one-sided fashion. So HLE ended up winning Game 3 in 31 minutes, 22 kills to 6. Viper ended 9-0-9 on the Sivir, and Zeka had a montage play. Just an absolute montage play at the end of the game, which I don't have the timestamp for, but if I luck into it, as I get to the next draft, I'll definitely show it. I want to show it now. At this point, I've talked about it. Yeah, Zeka just flies straight into Keen, snaps back. As you can see, there's just... GenG, they are very far down in this game. But, all right, give us the montage, Zeka. Give us the montage. Did I just clicked it at the wrong time, I guess. Here we go. This will be the montage. I apologize for podcast listeners. We're 31 minutes into the game. It's Hexol, but Zeka at half health flies in, executes Chovy before snapping back, lands a 3-man ultimate, and just absolutely rips the game over. I was going to say rips a soul out of GenG, but like they have plenty of soul. They're up 2-0. Okay, Game 4 draft. This is where it gets a little funny. HLE has to go back to red side. They keep their Galio ban the entire time. I need to move my camera for the draft. Kiana ban, Galio ban, and Braum ban. So they banned the Braum and the Kiana over the Yunara, which at first I think is rather bold. They traded for Aurora Nocturne. They're clearly going dive comp. GenG decides to do some counter dive stuff with Cassante and Alistair. The Smolder is a decent pick into the Yunara. Generally feel like you can outscale. You can get away from the Yunara all-ins in side lanes, but it's not going to ever dominate the Yunara. The 4-5 is where I start to believe in HLE. The Camille pick is just huge. Because to me, I feel like that gives them the critical mass they need to successfully dive onto the Yunara and potentially the Hue, who we'd already seen locked in by Chovy. But if they fall a little bit behind, the team composition is not going to work. So it's high execution, balls in HLE's court, whereas GenG has definitely picked scaling, frontline, team fighting in this final game. 6 minutes into the final game, I think they make a pretty interesting play into top lane. So there's going to be a lot of swapping at Worlds, as we've seen. At 6 minutes, Zeus decides to delay his swap. Now, this is key because he needs to stay ahead of the Cassante this game. He really does. But they also gave over Yunara. So I think their goal is, how can we stop Yunara from popping off in this game? So that's why he decides to stick around. And they end up getting this kill. They have to burn a ton for it. Zeus, flash ults. I mean, Viper flashes, Leona flashes. But look at how much tempo they lose for this. This is, to me, not worth it at all. So because that play took a while, the wave was already crashing, and Zeus probably makes a mistake here by not recalling first for any items or any mana, and he just wants to make sure he gets this experience so he doesn't fall even further behind the Cassante. But because he teleports in with no mana, not only can he not fight back, he also ends up getting proxied. And the amount of tempo that they lose here, so sure, they get a kill onto Ruler into Viper's Smolder, but they lose plate spot. Zeus is 22 CS behind Cassante. Drake goes down. And then because he still has no TP, he's getting proxied, doesn't want to just give all the tempo over, so tries to stick around for one more wave. Once that happens, Canyon's like, I guess we can just take grubs too. So all told, that one kill onto Smolder, which Smolder's not going to be able to do anything with, by the way. Maybe if Zeus gets that kill and he can get his items a little bit sooner to fight the Cassante in the sideline, maybe then it's worth it. But they don't get the kill onto the Camille. They get it onto Viper, which is only going to matter later in the game. They lose plate spot. Camille falls behind. And they lose 2 objectives. Definitely not worth it. 2 more clips that I want to go over in this game. 15 minutes. I think HLE was just getting a little nervy at this stage in the game because they're already falling behind and they feel like they need to make a play. So they decide to full send it onto Canyon's Nidalee. I don't think you're allowed to go all in on Nidalee when Hue and Yunar are on your screen. Because I think they will just kill you. The Nidalee's not the problem. So they full send on a Nidalee. It takes them too long to kill him. But look at the damage that the Yunara and the Hue end up doing to HLE. And they get a little bit run over in this fight. Zeus's Camille also falls further behind. And then it's full desperation mode for them. Until the 20-minute Otacon fight. Where unfortunately, HLE's season ends. They go a bit early on to Chovy. And Camille Aurora arrive a little bit late. So they think they see an angle on Chovy because he's alone in the Otacon pit. So Peanut all ends him. But the Camille and Aurora both then have to TP in after. So it's desynced from the Nocturne ult. And I would say these two really have to be more patient and find Ruler. But they all 4 divers go onto Chovy, which leaves Ruler untouched on the backside of the fight. Chovy also got a lot of spells off before he died, and Ruler can just clean up the game. So Kind of a tragic end for HLE because they end up getting stomped in this Game 4. They did stomp GenG in the Game 3 draft, but it ends in a 3-1. HLE falls. I still feel like GenG is going to be the kind of overwhelming favorite towards the end of the World Championship, but the idea of them being this flawless team, I'm not completely sold on yet because they had a bad draft in this series. I think both games 1 and 2 were losable. And if those three things were true, like if they got, it would have to be quite unlucky, but there were angles in Game 1 for them to lose, definitely angles in Game 2 for them to lose, and they definitely lost Game 3 handily, but ended up winning the series 3-1 because they are GenG, and great games like this are decided on the margins. I appreciate everyone for hanging around for this GenG versus HLE review. Trying to make them a little bit quicker than the previous podcast because if I'm going to get through this week, I'm going to have a lot to do. Make sure to subscribe to the channel, turn your notifications on. I'm going to make an effort to get these quarterfinal reviews in, but I might not be able to make every single one of them happen. But again, appreciate everyone who watched and subscribed for my last video. I think that's the most subscribers I've ever received for one video, probably because I asked at the start of the video for subscribers. I realize asking at the end, much less effective, but here we are. If you've made it here, you're probably already subscribed. I appreciate you, and I'll see you next time.